Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. Look who I have with me today. It's actor, director Tim Matheson. So welcome, Tim.
Hey, Michael, thank you very much. Nice to be here with you guys.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on. You've been doing this for a while, and I've been a fan of yours, I think, fairly close to the beginning. At the time, growing up, I may not have realized it, but looking back, I can say, yeah, I've been watching you my entire life.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've been around since water, so it's like one of those things that, and fortunately for me, I started as a kid. So, and had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I was like learning as I was going and studying at the same time and taking classes. And there are some jobs I look back at and I go, ooh boy. I made all the mistakes you could make on that part,
Yeah.
and it was just by trial and error. And then finally, my early 20s, I was under contract, like that one of the last, I guess, at Universal. And I was so that I'm being paid for a full year, and I wasn't in a series, so I could take fencing class and voice class and dance and movement and Stanislavski method training and Shakespeare. And so I just immersed myself in learning everything I could about all the different ways to approach acting.
They don't really do the contracts anymore.
No. I mean, it was there were I think at that time James Caan was under term contract to Universal, and Carrie Snodgrass and a few others. And there were two levels. There were beginners, they call them beginners terms, which was just a way that they got around paying you the basic Screen Actors Guild rate, because they'd pay you $150 a week, and then they could put you in any show. And I was more experienced, so I was getting a real salary. But I started out being in this episode in this series called The Virginian, and it was a 90-minute Western. It was, but it was so much fun. I mean, growing up, getting paid to ride horses and have a gun on.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
Not bad at all.
My father's a big Western fan, so we spent a lot of time watching those shows. So I've seen you on The Virginian. At the time, I've seen you. You showed up on Bonanza for a while, so seen you on there. And then my mother, she was in love with Martin Milner from Adam 12, and so you appeared on Adam 12, an episode of that, and I can remember that watching. Well, so I've been watching for a while.
Yeah. You were probably two, but I mean the thing about that Adam 12 was it was a one-day job. And it was a funny character. He was in the back of the police car. He'd been arrested for stealing a horse, and he was on LSD. He was a hippie kid on LSD who was stealing the horse to ride back to Texas and from LA. And the whole scene was just in the car. And so that episode caught the attention of the studio, and they said, well, let's put him in The Virginian. One thing came to another, and that's how I got into that show. So, it was one of those things I learned early on. You always have to be at your best. You always have to deliver, because if you don't, what's the unintended consequence? There's so many times where somebody says, I saw you did this episode of something, and it was really good, and I decided I wanted to work with you, as a director, or somebody said that. And it was like, so I realized that even the smallest little thing, if you just are real and practice your craft, it always serves you well.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because you're right. And whatever job you're working in, if you dog it, you never know who's going to see that. I mean, maybe it's just that one day you're having an off day, but you don't know who's going to see that. So you don't know what kind of future consequences that has.
Oh, that's truth. That is the truth.
So when I was growing up, I was growing up through the 70s, we didn't have cable at the time, but my grandmother did. She lived close to Wheeling, West Virginia, and we would go up there. And Wheeling had a TV station, and every morning they would show all the cartoons. So I get Johnny Quest, I get Space Ghost, Sinbad Jr., Samson, all of those. And I didn't know that you're doing all these voices for these cartoons, but I absolutely loved those cartoons. To this day, I still love those cartoons. But you were involved with all of those.
You know, it's good to hear you like them. You know, it was a period in my career where I was transitioning from being a kid actor. I think I got Johnny Quest I auditioned when I was 15, and then I got it when I was 16 in the show. So I could actually drive over to the studio, and my mother and I would, you know, I started with Johnny Quest, and then at the end of that, you know, Joe Barbera, who was one of the two heads of the company, liked me and liked what I was doing. So he put me in another show, and yet another show, and then another show. And I got to work with those great voice actors, and Mel Blanc, who did all of the Warner Brothers. Daffy Duck and Porky Pig and, you know, Bugs Bunny. I mean, they were some of the finest actors I've ever worked with. And I mean, I think Mel Blanc could actually play two characters having a conversation with each other and jump back and forth. And I had enough trouble just doing me. I couldn't figure it. And every now and then they throw me another part and say, hey, come up with another voice for this one. And the trick is all of a sudden I forget, well, what was that voice? What did I do? You know, whereas these guys, boom, you know, were just astonishing to work with.
Yeah, that group, especially the old time voice actors, just amazing. How they could come up with so many different voices and not confuse them.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
A lot of it was, you know, and I'm talking ancient history, but a lot of those guys came up through radio. And, you know, and so that was, or what we now call podcasts. And that was where they were trained and skilled. You know, they were theater actors. And so, but radio was really where they started doing all the different voices and stuff and playing multiple parts. And then they, you know, and then we would all be in the same room acting an episode of Johnny Quest together. Whereas nowadays, I think with all the Pixar and the Disney things and all the different animated films, they typically don't do that. They do one character at a time, and it was fun. It was like a radio show when we did those.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer to be in a room with other people so you can kind of act off of them, even though you're not actually showing up on screen.
No, exactly, because the way they say their line affects the way you say your next line. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So we finally got cable near the end of the 70s, finally. And the only channel that came with it was TBS. That was we got a better picture in TBS. That was cable. And so TBS at that time, they were showing all the reruns. So then, you know, I was able to see Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons. You know, we were lucky enough to have Stanley Livingston came on the program.
Oh, Stanley's great. He's
just a terrific guy.
And a good director too.
Yeah. Great director. Yeah. And you did some of those shows.
I did a couple. I did an episode on My Three Sons when I was first starting. I think it was a great part. I accused Tramp, their dog, of biting me. And he hadn't, but I was just jealous of how wonderful their family was, and mine was like didn't measure up. So I remember I was like the bad kid. It was great. I mean, you know, it was so much fun, and they shot that over at Desilu, which is now part of Paramount. But the I Love Lucy stage was right next door, and you know, I mean, there was such history. I would just walk around and just see where all these great movies and TV shows were made. And I was just enamored and in love with the business, obviously. And that's why I wanted to be in it.
What got you to that point? I mean, because you started at such a young age, but what made you want to get into entertainment?
Well, I guess, you know, my parents went through a divorce. I was probably like 5 or 6. 7, and I remember where I would escape to like get away from whatever was going on at home was I'd spend all day at the movies, and
Yeah.
I would just watch, and then you could watch 2 movies and then, double bill, and then they'd run them again. And I could sit there all day and watch them. And I just felt safe there, and everything had pretty much a happy ending, and you knew what was going to happen because I'd seen the movie 3 or 4 times. So it was very comforting to me. And I just wanted to escape. I wanted to get into that world. And it was just something that I kept saying I wanted to do. And then one thing led to another. And my mother worked for a company her boss had a son who had an agent. He went up for some parts, and he didn't get it. But so my mom suggested they send me up, and they did. And I didn't get the lead part, but I got the smaller part, third kid through the door, as I used to call it.
That's pretty great. That's pretty good. Was that back when you were going to those movies? Was that when they kind of run continuous? So once they ended, they would just start back up. So if you showed up, you might show up after the movie had started, but if you waited long enough, it started back over.
Yeah. And it might have been, I think exactly right. It might have been, they took a 5-minute intermission or something so they could sweep up popcorn or something. But all I remember was great popcorn containers were like sort of square. And at the end, when you're done with it, you could smash them down and then use it like a Frisbee and throw it into the air through the theater. It was like,
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah, right.
So then I'm a teenager through the 80s, and we got into Animal House, which it still kind of holds up. That movie's just hilarious still to this day. But you ended up going on and actually owning National Lampoon for a while. How did that all come about?
What happened was the Lampoon had fallen on hard times, and the subscriptions were way down, and all magazines were having a hard time. And my partner and I had just produced a movie called Blind Fury for TriStar Productions, and we wanted to build a company that we could make television and movies and that had a brand name. And so we found a backer who said he'd give us the money, and it turned out the Lampoon needed sort of a rescue thing, and we came in, and but I got to tell you, it was the most cutthroat possible business venture I'd ever been involved in. I mean, I thought Hollywood was tough and people use their elbows and take credit for stuff they don't necessarily do. I had meetings with mobsters. I had to try and raise money. Oh my God. And
stressful.
Yeah, I mean, and they said, come on, we're going to make the deal right here in the room. And I go, well, we can't quite do that. We have a board of directors and lawyers that want to look at it. He goes, no, we'll just sign it all now. It'll be great. And I just said, well, I appreciate your interest in our company. We're going to have to take this back to the board. Woo! And, but what happened was all of the financiers sort of fell apart, and we got stuck with a guy who wasn't a very reputable guy. That was the only game in town we could get into. And finally, I just extricated myself, sadly, because we couldn't accomplish what we wanted to do with this fellow. And, and we couldn't, we'd set up a couple of movies, and we got the company back on its feet, and then we left it and just said, hey, go with God. Good luck.
Well, you did do the Van Wilder movie, and I had always heard that your character in that was based on your character from Animal House. Is that true?
I sort of, or inspired by, because he was, and Ryan Reynolds was so much fun to work with. And I had been a fan of him on TV. And what I loved about working with him is he was such a student of comedy, and he worked so hard, and he's so funny and skilled that it was a real revelation and treat for me to do that. And and I think it was sort of in the spirit of a Lampoon movie and Animal House for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty early in his career.
Oh yeah, it was his
Yes.
first feature, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's just, he just brings it every time he's in a film or a show. I mean, and he's the most gracious, nicest, talented young actor.
Yeah.
He's fabulous.
Yeah. That's always what you hear. You never hear any bad stories about Ryan Reynolds. They're all
No.
positive.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Which is really nice. Did you do, and I may not be remembering this right, but did you do a Western series with Kurt Russell at some point?
In 1976, we did a show called The Quest.
The Quest, that's right.
Right? And it was Kurt and me. It was sort of inspired by a movie called The Searchers, a John Ford, John Wayne movie.
Great movie.
Yeah, incredible movie. I think we ripped them off. About two brothers looking for their sister who has been taken by the indigenous people, the Indians. And so we were searching for her and traveling around the West.
Yeah.
And Kurt's character had grown up. He was captured with her, so he had been raised by the Indians. And so we'd gotten him back, and he was, acclimating to Western culture.
Right.
And I was a doctor, and so we traveled around and had a hell of a time. But it was a really good show. We had a great time, but it was up against Charlie's Angels.
Oh yeah.
And we kept going, I wonder who's going to be watching us instead of that show.
Yeah. That's a tough one. That's a tough break.
It was a toughie.
Yeah, I got to speak with Jacqueline Smith, came on a couple months ago, and I mean she's just as beautiful now as she was 40 years ago.
Yeah, and what a lovely lady. I did a movie with her up here in Vancouver, and she's just delightful, good actor, and just wonderful to work with. But I got to tell you, working with Kurt was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had. I learned so much from him because he was a pro baseball player, and he and his dad owned a minor league baseball team in Portland, and Portland Mavericks, I think it was. And he really had been around since he was a kid, so he had learned so many lessons that he'd always drop, these little asides saying, do it this way, let's try it that way. And I learned so much from him about the craft and about how to preserve your energy if you're shooting, like we were shooting 12-hour 14-hour days, and so he was wonderful, and he stayed a good friend too. So he's a pretty special guy.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, one of the best Western actors ever. Love him in Westerns.
Yeah, he's real good. I mean, yeah, he's just so good.
Yeah, he's terrific. You also had a part in a Brady Bunch movie. A good friend of ours is Jennifer Elise Cox. She was playing Jan, but she said tell you hello. She
give her my regards. We had so much fun working together. She was a hoot.
Yeah. Oh, she's funny. Yeah, just crack you up. Just a normal conversation. Crack you up.
And it was so nutty to do that show because it was at that point it was still on the air, 2 episodes back to back every day on a local station in Los Angeles. And so in the trailers of our dressing rooms, which were outside the stage where the Brady house was and had been recreated exactly the way it had been.
Amazing.
I could watch 2 episodes of the Brady show, then go on in and be in that room and be in that house.
Wow.
And it was like, this is crazy. I mean, it's like a dream or something. This is weird. But
that's kind of surreal.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Yeah, that's terrific. So I know that at some point you got into directing. So how did that come about? Because you've directed, on a ton of really, really good shows.
What happened for me was, as I looking at the whole landscape of my career, I noticed about every 6 to 7 years, you'd have to shift gears. It's like I did Westerns, and then when I got done with that, I wasn't happy with the parts I was getting. I was always the nice guy next door. So I started taking improv classes. Then I got Animal House. And then I was doing comedies, and Animal House was my first comedy. But I look back and I'd see that, every 6 or 7 years, things would shift. And there was the West Wing, and there was this and that. And then your career also ebbs and flows. And being a man who had 3 kids and married and a mortgage, I had to keep working. So if I was slowing down in acting, I just said, well, you know what I'll do is I'll start directing television movies. I was acting in a lot of TV movies.
Yeah.
That sort of morphed into directing episodic and directing pilots and different series. And I'd always loved directing. I'd always wanted to direct. I mean, probably as much as I did love acting, but acting took off, so I just stayed in that lane.
Sure.
And then the more opportunity I got to direct, I liked it. But what happens with directing is it sucks up all the time. If you act in a movie, let's say a feature movie, it's 8, 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. If you act in a series, it's 8 days, 6, 8 days, 10
right.
days. But a director is there 3 times as long. They're there for prep, getting ready to shoot. It takes as long as it does to shoot. So it's 10 days beforehand, and 10 days to shoot, and then 4 or 5 days to edit. Now there's a month, So
right.
And then I couldn't really get into acting jobs, so I sort of segued into being a director. Loved it. And then I think it was really when my marriage ended. I moved back from Santa Barbara into Los Angeles, and I got this show called Hart of Dixie. And and they wanted me to direct a couple episodes every year, and I did, but I just felt so happy and comfortable to be just back acting again, just doing that. So that when Virgin River finally came along, I directed a few at the beginning, and then I just said, let me just focus on the acting. I think it'll be better for the character and me, and and it'll be much more restful for me.
Yeah.
You don't sleep when you're directing. You don't sleep.
Well, no, it has to be stressed because you're responsible for all of it instead of just yourself.
and for me, there's always more research or another movie to look at that informs me about what the show I'm doing, and I can look at it and say, I like the way they did that. Maybe I should try that. So I was always looking for as they say, steal from the best. So I'd always watch Spielberg and all the great directors to see how they would have done this thing, and then get inspired by that.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I always play this game with the family, and I'll go around and I'll say, what do you know this person from? They're coming on the show. So my oldest, my daughter, that's what she said. Hart of Dixie. That was her first one. She loved Hart of Dixie. So she said you were terrific on that.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you for me. Well, I love that show. Rachel Bilson was just a treat to work with. And it was also 5 minutes from my house. So, I mean, no matter how late a morning start I got, I could never be late to work because no matter what happened, there's only 4 minutes, 5 minutes away. So there I was.
That's pretty good. Have you ever directed? Have you had to direct yourself? I'm assuming you have, right? Have you acted in a show that you're also directing?
I would say many, if not most. And it's always better when I don't have to do that. But in Hart of Dixie, I was directing myself, and in Virgin River 2, in the first 2 seasons, I directed 4 episodes. But it's interesting because I met my wife, my current wife, Elizabeth, on the set of Hart of Dixie, and what was so funny was I was directing the finale of the first season of Hart of Dixie, which was the wedding episode of my daughter, and it just exploded and fell apart. And I'm in a tuxedo for the wedding, and so that's when I met my wife, and it was like it's not a bad way to, in a tuxedo.
No, that's a good look. You're making a good impression.
Yeah. So it kind of helped me out, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So is Tim the director hard on Tim the actor?
Yes. And you're also, you're also always directing yourself too. And, that's why when a scene's over, I often say to a director, I think that last take or that one take was, I think, the better one of the bunch because it flowed more organically, but you never know how it looks to a director, what they're looking for. And you can't really tell them that they have to use a certain thing, but it's, as directing myself, it's tricky because you don't, as a director, you're standing back and watching. Whereas if I'm acting in a scene, I can't look at it like a director.
Right.
So I have to rely on either the cameraman or, camera operator or the assistant director or producer or somebody to say, hey, do we need to do that again? Or was that okay? Or, so it's a lot harder.
Yeah, I would think so. I would have difficulty with that. I think it'd be hard enough for me to act, but to have to actually direct along with it, I don't, it'd be like, those old time cartoon guys talking to themselves, playing different characters. It's too much.
The best actor director I can think of is Clint Eastwood, and having worked with Clint on Magnum Force, I gotta tell you, I learned so much from him. Just he was, even though he's not credited with directing that movie, I think Ted Post directed it, but he probably directed it. He just his presence and he shoots so quickly and makes it so easy and so real that like the first day I met him and we had a scene where it was in a shooting range and I think I had most of the dialogue of the cops. I think it was my one scene or in the movie where I did sort of anything. And I came up to him and introduced myself because I had met him and I said, hey, so if you want to run lines, be happy to, rehearse whatever you want to do. And he goes, no, I like saying the lines the first time on camera. And he said, something special happens, and then you got it on film, and I went, okay. And I walked away thinking, okay, he doesn't know how to act. He's some cowboy TV star that got lucky in making movies. Then we go and we shoot the scene, and he's the most intense listener, the most active listener that I think is an actor, the best listener I ever worked with. And he changed the line that affected my line. I changed it back, and he bounced off of that. And I adored working with him. By the end of that day, I walked away and said, this guy's the real deal. I was so wrong. What a talent. The nicest guy, always generous to his fans. And he was just, he set a standard for me to learn from. And I've always watched the way, his movies because he's remarkable.
Yeah, he's still doing it.
I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Gran
pretty great.
Torino was a fabulous movie too.
Oh my gosh, one of the best.
Yep, and he keeps doing them all. My favorite was The Unforgiven. I think Bridges of Madison County and Unforgiven are two perfect movies.
Yeah.
And he and Meryl Streep together, even though he's probably 10 to 15 years too old for that part, that doesn't matter. He just is so real and so good. And so is she. It was just like,
they're amazing. Yeah. And agree with Unforgiven. Probably one of my favorite, not just Westerns, but just movies in general. Great movies.
Yeah. And I'd heard stories from actors. I worked on that. And Clint, he would just say, well, let's see what you guys want to do here, and there's 6-8 guys in a bar scene. He says, well, all right, Gene Hackman and all this. He says, just do what you're going to do. So show me what you want to do. And he'd look at it, and they're such good actors, they'd do something really good. And he'd say, all right, yeah, do that. We're going to put the camera here. And that was his directing. He empowered everyone around him to bring it and to do their best, and didn't rely on him to tell them everything to do, because I think it's a business of discovery, and the more you empower cast and crew and everybody involved to bring it, then I think you have a special group of people and you have a special thing.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I love that movie and a lot of his movies because they're westerns, but they have a lot of flaws. So it's like it would, you have this kind of vision of what a gunfight would be like, but that's not really the reality. But a lot of his movies shows probably what it was like, that it's just chaos, and that it's a lot of times just luck that you even get out of there.
Yeah. He was just so good, and still is. And what a treat to work with.
So you got to be VP on The West Wing, which amazing show. I'm such a fan of the writing, but what was that like for you to be on a show that is still as looked at as just one of the most well-written shows I think that has ever been done?
Well, yeah, thank you. And yeah, it was so obvious that Aaron Sorkin was one of the most amazingly talented writers.
Yeah.
From episode to episode. And I mean, just stuff like I came in for I think they'd done 1 or 2 episodes of the first season, and then my character was introduced. And I come to the table read, and so all these actors are all, Martin Sheen and Brad Whitford, everybody's there, Allison Janney and John Spencer, and Aaron's there, and Tommy Shalami, the director, and I'm jumping in, and he said, "Tim, your first scene is mostly in French." And I said, "Yeah, right. Thanks, Aaron." And he goes, "No, I mean it." "Do you speak French?" I said, "Yeah, sort of." He says, "Okay, because you're talking to some French journalists, and so you're going to do it in French." And I went, "Okay." But I mean, he was. So we read that first script, and it was so good. And then I remember I get a script for the next episode where I'm in, and I come in. I think there's no way he can do anything better than he just did that last episode. And then he move it up. He just raised the bar, and it was just remarkable. It was just some of the scenes that I got to play with Martin.
Martin Sheen.
Thank you. Martin Sheen and John Spencer were just beyond belief, and it was such a joy and a treat to do that show. And I was in it for 4 seasons. I was never a regular. I do 5 to 8 shows a year or something. And the last season, at the end of the 4th season, I got a call from Aaron and Tommy Shalami, the two producers and writer director. And they said, "Hey, Tim, listen, your show's great. You're doing great." He said, "We got some good news and bad news." I said, "Okay." And he said, "What's the good?" I said, "What's the good news?" He said, "Well, the last 2 episodes are all about you." And I said, "Great." And he said, "What's the bad news?" He says, "Well, we're leaving the show, and you're leaving the show. You're gonna go out in disgrace, be caught having an affair, and you're gonna have to retire, resign as vice president." And it was a plot point because they wanted John Goodman, I think the Speaker of the House, to come in as a Republican to
shake it up a little bit.
Yeah. So, but it was those are the 4 best years, I think, of the show. And
I agree.
Yeah. And I just loved working with them, and it was a treat.
I always heard that we've had a few actors on that have done some of Aaron's shows, and they said that he's very particular about his dialogue. So he didn't really like you adding anything or taking anything away. He wanted it said the way, if there's a comma, he wants you to make sure that that's in there, or a pause or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, we have a script supervisor on the set that always comes up and tells you if you got the lines wrong or something. There was a script supervisor, and there was a dialogue coach. And the dialogue coach she came up to me one time and said, "It's not a period, it's a semicolon." Okay. I got it. And then my favorite one was in rehearsal. If you wanted to change something or try something, that's where you would do it. And I had a speech that was like 3/4 of a page long, and I was talking to the press or something. And I got into the middle of it, and I wanted to add a little, like a shift gears, like, I'm talking about this and then and about that, So I was that I added. I tried it in rehearsal, and I thought, I'll ask Tommy, the director, if that's okay when we get back after they're lighting it. As I'm walking off the stage, in comes Aaron from the stage outside, and he says, "Hey Tim, hi." And I said, "Hi Aaron." He said, "Hey, keep that that was really good." I was thinking like, oh my God, he's a fly on the wall. He just
he's aware.
Yeah,
it's pretty great. Well, you did eventually get promoted. You got to play Reagan in Killing Reagan, which was a terrific book.
Yeah,
but I thought you did a really good job portraying him.
Oh, thank you. It was such a great experience, and I came in, told Rod Lurie, the director, I said, I'm not gonna do like do an impression of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
I think it's a mistake. I played Jack Kennedy in a mini series once, and the mistake when I looked back at it, when I saw the film, was I was working so hard on the voice and the accent that this got a little bit obscured, perhaps, or at least in my mind it did. I didn't like, I felt that fell short of the humanity of the character. So I said, I'm going to work on what he's feeling. I'll, I had a vocal coach and a dialect coach.
Sure.
And I was working, so, but that wasn't my first thing. And I said, just tell me if you need more or less or something, just tell me. And because basically it was a love story between he and Nancy was what the side was. And the director was great. Rod, he never had the guy who played John Hinckley anywhere near us. He was never on the set when we were there. He was never in the car when we were going, never. He did not want us to be thinking about the event that was coming,
Right. And, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it was great. I mean, it was, and Cynthia Nixon is just an incredible actress to work with. And so we had a fine time. And so then it wasn't so much about the attempt to kill Reagan for us. It was just about their love story.
Yeah, I love that. Ronald Reagan, when he was shot, I was in the 5th grade. And I remember, they rolled the TV into the classroom and we watched that, that entire ordeal. And it really made an impact. Now when things happen, it's everywhere just instantly. It's so much bigger now, but I don't know. It's almost like back then it was an even bigger impact because you never got to witness that type of thing semi-live. But that, to me, that's the first one I remember was Reagan getting shot, of really being immersed in it.
Yeah, and it was bewildering to me, because he was such a decent fellow.
Yeah.
And it was like, who'd want to shoot him? I mean, what's the deal here?
Yeah.
And it turns out the guy's just a nutcase, and that had emotional and mental issues, and was trying to impress Jodie Foster
of all people. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I think he just recently got. He's out. Everything's, which hopefully all that stuff mentally is behind him.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah.
That it's been that long.
God. Yeah.
I mean, it's been decades now. It's hard to passage of time. And, as you get older, it's just like, it just seems to go faster and faster.
Yes, that's so true.
So I wanted to mention that we loved you on Evil.
Oh, thank you.
That's one that I was a big Farscape fan, and it's the same gentleman doing evil. So my wife and I watched the show, and there you come on there, and you got a little bit of a character on there.
Oh, he's so much fun. He's just and he's flamboyant and totally evil, and got to work with Christine Lottie and
she's amazing.
She's great, and the cast on that show was just wonderful, and it was, I just had a ball. I mean, I got to sort of free reign to do all sorts of stuff that to go for it. And
he's a little creepy at times.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's always, it's the most fun to play those kind of characters, because it's sort of it's like therapy, because you usually keep those parts of yourself shut off, and here I got to let it all out, and it was, and it's great therapy. You walk away at the end of the day going, woo, that felt weird, but okay, what the heck?
Yeah. I thought you're really good in that. And it was a little different for me. It was a little different role than I'm used to seeing you in. So that was fun.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's always good. It's always good to keep stretching and playing different things, but oftentimes playing the bad guy is the most fun,
Yeah.
And the better the bad guy, the better the movie, is typically the old saying.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And then that kind of brings us up to Virgin River. We were talking off camera. You're in the middle of, or at the beginning, I guess, of shooting season 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe it just seems like that show just came out. It's already on season 5.
Oh, I know. It's, for us, it's been an amazing ride, because we did a year, and it's the first streaming show I've done. So what happens is you shoot it, and for Netflix, the post-production, the after shooting thing, where they put it all together, and they dub it and subtitle it in every language around the world. So that takes 5 months, 4 or 5 months. And so we did the show, and then you don't hear anything about it, and then it comes out, and then we started shooting the next season. But it was only during COVID that when we were finishing up the 3rd season, where we got a hint of how popular the show was, because it was like the #1 show on Netflix uniformly almost all over the world. And it was like, and we were shooting our last episode at the end of season 3, and it was like, and we were all together, the cast and crew, and we got that information and that news, and it was like, wow, who knew? I mean, we thought, oh, it's okay.
Who knew?
Okay. And it was like a huge, and we stayed #1 for week after week after
Well, that's what I was going to say. Who knew was like all the women in my family. They loved it right from the beginning.
Yeah. Big part of our audience.
Yeah, I got to have Terrell Rothery was on the show last year. She is so great on Virgin River as well. But she's such a good actress that it's fun seeing both of you on there.
And she's going to be in season 5 a little bit more than she has been.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah,
it's exciting. Yeah, that's pretty great. What an amazing career. The thing I now that we've been talking for a while that I kind of like is that you never stop trying to learn new things and to like expand your skill set. I think that's really neat.
Well, I thank you. I think it keeps you young, and I think it keeps you, from getting. Oftentimes, a lot of actors fall back on old tricks. You got, this works. If I do this, that works. That's so. And or you just sort of, I don't want to say walk through it, but you're just doing the same old. And I think by doing things like evil and trying out different parts, and this character is different than what I did in Hart of Dixie, you just try and find the truth in each character and the way the author intends it to be, and keep going for it.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. So I know we need to wrap up, but I wanted to throw a couple more out there that I've been racking my brain. I was like, I know there's something else I wanted to bring up. So we had a drive-in movie theater close to the house when I was pretty young, and every weekend they would show a double Disney feature. So the first one would be like an animated feature. And then the second one would be, the actual movie. And a lot of times it was a Tim Conway movie.
Yeah.
So it dawned on me. I was like, you did an Apple Dumpling Gang.
Yeah. I think it was perhaps the first movie I did after Animal House. And what happened was I knew Animal House, if it worked, would be groundbreaking kind of new comedy.
Right.
But we didn't get paid anything to do Animal House. It was the lowest budget movie for Universal that year, and nobody got paid anything. Belushi didn't get paid hardly anything.
Yeah.
And so I needed a job. So they asked me if would I do this? I said, yeah, sure. I mean, and a chance to work with Tim. And it was the old form of comedy, if you want to look at
a lot of slapstick.
Yeah. And I mean, but who better to work with than Tim Conway and Don Knotts?
Yeah.
And Tim Conway worked so hard to make sure Don Knotts broke up on camera. I mean, he would just go after and just say things that would get Don into hysterics. And it's amazing we ever got anything shot. But those two guys were just a treat to work with. And later on, I think in a show called Las Vegas, a Josh Duhamel show, I directed Don Knotts in an episode and got to work with him again. And just what a sweet fella. What a wonderful.
Oh, yeah. He's from West Virginia.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was born here.
Barney Fife is from West Virginia. There you go.
Yeah, if you can believe it. We've got him and Bob Denver. So we've got Gilligan too.
and Maynard G. Krebs, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Toby Gillis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Were you close with John Belushi?
Yes. I got to be very, very close to him because back then there was a tremendous sort of competition between New York and LA actors, and New York actors always had this attitude like, we're the real actors. We do theater, we study, we're serious about our work. And Hollywood are just pretty boys and just, and you get by on your personality and you don't really know about anything about acting. So when we got up to Eugene, Oregon, where we shot the movie, most all of the cast was from New York, and Belushi included. And me and Flounder, I think, were the only two from LA. And I was nervous, that he could cop a big attitude. He was, the king of TV and all this. Right. John was the most gracious, supportive, and it was my first comedy.
Right.
And he was the most gracious and supportive and encouraging person and actor that he could possibly be. And that just set the tone for everybody. So there was none of that backbiting or that kind of trying to upstage somebody or any of that. It was just, he created us all as a team. The Deltas became this team, and we're just there for each other. And he was always there for me. And so I did spend some time with him in New York on Saturday Night Live, watching the show. So I got to know him pretty well. Then I worked with him again on 1941, the Steven Spielberg movie. You worked with, we were friends with Walter Olkowitz, and we were lucky. My wife and I were lucky enough to visit with him a few times before he passed. But he talks about his experience working on that movie and just how the cast was so fun to work with and such a good group. Yeah, it was great, but at that point, what the sad part was, John was huge star and was sort of getting, he was a record star with the Blues Brothers, and he was a movie star, and he was, a TV star. And so it got to him, and he was one of those guys that whenever you were around him, people were always coming up trying to party with him. Come on, John, here's some drugs, and he had a hard time saying no, and it ultimately cost him his life, and it was a tragedy because he was so talented,
unbelievably talented,
such a big heart, and it's a shame.
I always think about that because we've lost a lot of great people over the years, similar circumstances, and it always just makes you wonder, what did we miss out on because they were such talents.
Chris Farley, he was sort of in the mold of John Belushi, and he loved Animal House. He loved the fact that I was in it and knew Belushi and you know, and it's just they burn bright and then, you know, and too bright, and then they move on, and we were lucky to have them for as long as we had them, you know, because pretty intense lives they live.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Animal House, one of the best music soundtracks of all time.
Oh yeah. That's it.
I still have a CD in my car. I plug that in.
Yes. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Love that. Last one I wanted to mention was my wife's favorite movie is Fantasia, and you did some narration, kind of like the re-release, wasn't it, when they brought it back out?
I believe so. Yeah, it was like one of those things that I think I did it in like an hour or two. You know, so I hardly remember what I did, but I know that. But I mean, it's one of the all-time great movies that, you know, Disney did back in the early days. You know, and groundbreaking stuff, and the animation was amazing when you look back on it. You know, I'm like, how did they do that back then? You know what they did was they actually would film actors doing the physical thing in the scene, and then they would use that as the inspiration for how to draw it, and you could just look at it and tell, oh, they have their hand went up here, they did this, so that they really wanted to make it human. And it was like, I think Disney was one of the first to actually do human beings like really human beings.
It makes sense.
Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, I mean, they weren't cartoon characters as much as they were real, you know.
Yeah, they brought them to life.
And they based them. The funniest thing that ever happened to me was when I was in high school. I was my friend. There was the Tanis family was a Dorothy I went to school with, so I was always up at her house. And when I first knew her father, I kept thinking, God, I know this guy from somewhere. I just know him. And he was they ran a dress business. He was a painter, but he'd also been an animator and had also worked at Disney. Back in the day. And I said to him, I said, gosh, you just remind me, I don't know why you look so familiar to me. He goes, oh, he said, I was the model for Captain Hook. I said, that's it, Henry, it was Captain Hook. And so that's how they did it back then. They'd find somebody either working there or some actor or something, and they would base the character on that. And he was Captain Hook.
Wouldn't you lean into that? I would be going as Captain Hook every Halloween.
Yes. It was pretty amazing. It was amazing.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. I was so happy that you agreed to come on the show. I'm such a fan, and this has just been the best time.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I just can't believe I forgot Martin Sheen's last name, but you know, it's a whirlwind. But I love being on your show, and thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. So a couple quick things before we go. Anything else that you're working on that we can kind of keep an eye out for?
Actually, just, you know, really, it's just sort of Virgin River, and sort of that's taken up most of the time now, and. I am going to go to Italy. We're going to go Christmas, and I'm going to get together with the actor who dubs Doc in Italian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I want to meet with him, and we're going to, you know, have dinner. And his wife actually plays Mel in the Italian version.
Oh, so how fun.
We're going to have an Italian reunion, and my wife speaks Italian. Hopefully she'll translate for everything.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you if you spoke Italian, but that'll be great.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So that's what I got to look forward to after we finish this series.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So last thing, are you on social media? And if you are, where can we find you?
Well, you know what? I am on Facebook, and but you know, I sort of stay away from it. I got kind of stuck down the rabbit hole and was getting involved in all this political stuff. And then I finally just found, you know what? I don't want to be the guy yelling, get off my lawn. So I just said, and I regained a couple hours a day from, you know, and I don't
it's a time suck.
You know, and I admire people who do it, and it's all great. But I just find that I can live with that. I do promote Virgin River on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but I don't really interact with it too much. I try to protect myself from that.
Yeah, no, I get it. But it was such a, like when Facebook first came out, it was such a good idea. You're like, oh, I can show my pictures and I can reconnect with family and friends. And it went downhill so fast.
It's true. It's true, and it's like, people taking pictures of their food and everything. It's like, okay, just eat it,
Yeah, just eat the food. No, nobody cares what you're eating. Just eat it. Just eat it. But yeah. And then the political stuff, kind of exploded the last few years. And Instagram, I think, is probably the nicest one. It's still just
I think you're
pictures. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you do it a certain way, then you don't necessarily, it won't stay there forever. It'll be there for, an hour or two or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And it's gone.
Yeah.
Then they don't have to keep looking at your, previous meals.
That's right.
All right, Tim, hold on one second. How terrific was that, Tim Matheson? Such a huge fan of his. And that hour went by pretty quickly. He has been in and done so much. There's no way to hit everything. So I hope I hit some highlights. I know I hit some highlights for me. I hope I hit some highlights for you guys. But just to mention a few other things that I loved him in, but I didn't want to keep him forever. He voiced an evil Fred in a Scooby-Doo movie that I thought was terrific. He played a sheriff in a show called Wolf Lake with Lou Diamond Phillips. I was a big fan of that. He had appearances on Black Sheep Squadron, How the West Was Won, which were shows that were also on TBS when we first got cable. He played Alan in Fletch, which was such a great movie. He was Charles in Drop Dead Fred, was another one that I liked. Harlan in She's All That. He did The Story of Us with Michelle Pfeiffer, which I love that movie. And he played Joe Hardy in a Hardy Brothers movie called Mystery of the Chinese Junk. So I love, and This Is Us. He had a little run on This Is Us, which was terrific as well. And then going through just some of the shows that he's directed, and a lot of these were shows that I dearly love. St. Elsewhere, a very underrated sci-fi show called Threshold. Eureka, which if you've watched me on here before, that me and my oldest Ashley love Eureka. So that was one he's done some directing. My son, who edits all these podcasts, Brett, his favorite show is Psych. Tim has directed some of those. Suits, Lucifer, Person of Interest, The Last Ship, all of those he's directed on. Just a unbelievably talented. Oh, we didn't even talk about, he got to work with Lucille Ball on a movie called Yours, Mine, and Ours, which I think also had Henry Fonda. Just a amazing career. And he looks like he could do this for decades going forward, which is hard to wrap your head around when you think back that he's on black and white Westerns and TV shows like Leave It to Beaver. Unbelievable. And I didn't want to fan out too much. Johnny Quest, one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Speed Racer, Johnny Quest, probably my two favorites. So him voicing Johnny Quest, you don't understand what a big deal that is to me. Of all the things he's done, that's the one. And probably third on that list would be Space Ghost, and he was Jace on Space Ghost. Just unbelievable. I absolutely loved this interview. Bucket list interview for me. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll try to rein it back in, calm down. I thought I did pretty good during the interview while Tim was on. So I'm going to let a little bit of it out here at the end. If you haven't done so yet, in order for us to keep bringing these terrific guests, and I'm so proud of the people we've had on the program, if you can believe it, we're closing in on 500 episodes. Amazing, just amazing. And we've had the best people. And the way that we can keep doing that is if we go and we say, hey, we've got all of these subscribers, all these listeners that are listening in on the show, would you like to come on? It really helps us out. So if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. If you're watching, you can go to YouTube, MeisterCon Pod, subscribe. If you're listening, same thing. Whatever device, whatever platform you're using, please subscribe to us. It really does help us out. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. Huge help. So please subscribe. You can find all of those episodes, audio and video, on our website, meistercon.com. If we're doing anything in studio, if we're going on location, if we're covering a convention, if we're going to a concert, whatever it is that we have going on, it'll be on the website, meistercon.com. So make sure you check that out. And I haven't mentioned it in a while, but it has got a terrific, geeky, funny, well-written blog from Brett that I absolutely love. And I think you will as well. So you can check that out on the website, meistercon.com. Thank you guys so much. Until next time. Bye, everybody.